Hey folks, welcome back to Indaba Africa. This is Chris. Excuse me. Welcome to Chris White Africa on the Indaba Africa channel. Sorry, a little bit out of sorts. My pupils are still the size of silver dollars. I safely managed to navigate back home. But my profuse apologies that we didn't have this stream earlier. But we will now have my guest on just a moment. My guest is Joe Stong, who's from Wyoming Catholic College. He's originally from Michigan, but he's a transplant out to Wyoming, and this gentleman is all into Wyoming. He's bought in entirely, and you can't blame him. It's an amazing place with wonderful people, and we'll talk a bit about that today. But today's topic with Joe is going to be focused primarily on the Special Operations Force Veterans Trip that Wyoming Catholic College put together to take Special Operations Force, Navy SEALs, Army Delta Force, Army Rangers, and from the other services to go out to Wyoming to have a commune, to be together, to hike through the mountains, to camp, to share an experience, to help folks adjust to transition from military life to civilian life. And for some folks, they've just gotten out, like myself, just a year ago. Others have been out for several years. The transition can be long for some folks, particularly if you've had injuries in combat or you're dealing with PTSD or things like that. But even aside from that, it can be quite the transition. And folks, I'm going to bring in the person who is responsible, the mind behind all this, the guy who really spearheaded and got it going. He'll be a guest on my channel for future events. But today we're going to talk to Joe Stong about this trip. And so I'm going to welcome him. Hey, Joe, welcome to the channel. You're on screen now.
Hey, thanks, Chris. Glad to be with you again.
No, it's awesome. Listen, I don't know about you, Joe, but I really felt a good bond with you out there. And you and I were tent mates out there. I guess maybe we should or maybe shouldn't share that, but we were tent mates, and we were kind of actually, a lot of the time you and I were right at the front of the column marching. We were hiking out there, so we chatted quite a bit. It was quite a great experience. Of course, Joe and I know each other through LinkedIn. So, Joe, I did a little bit, and I guess before we go any further, I should say that I think that one of the reasons why you probably incline to have an appreciation for vets is because you have your own little army. You've got a platoon of family members there. So, I mean, it's Joe's got a big family. So, Joe, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself so the audience knows more about Joe Stong?
Sure. Well, I was born in Detroit, Michigan, and I'm the youngest of six. My father was a naval officer, and then he worked in various engineering companies, including for the Apollo project back in the 1960s. So the family moved around a lot. My siblings are born in different states. But I'm from Michigan, and then I grew up in Ohio and in Minnesota and back in Michigan. I graduated from high school and went off to Connecticut. I was in the seminary for 11 years. So I started in Connecticut, went to Spain, went to Italy, came back to America, did some missionary work, fundraising work, and then finished my licenciate degree in Rome, Italy back in 1999, and discerned that the priesthood was not my calling and came home. And I've been working for various charities ever since. And I met my wife in Michigan, and our kids. We've got kids from the South and kids from the North. So it's kind of fun to have the historical arguments when we've got Virginians and a Georgian and two Michiganders. So it's always been fun to see the whole country, see the diversity of America, and see how we're different, but at the same time, how much we're alike.
No, I think that's an interesting point you make. It's there are a lot of differences between Americans locally, but especially regionally, between dialects, different sayings. If, for instance, depending where you live in the country and how you grow up, you might call it soda, you might call it pop, or if you're in California, you call all of it cola. Doesn't matter if it's ginger ale, it's called cola.
That's right.
Or you say,
what kind of Coke do you want?
Exactly. What kind of Coke? I'll have a 7-Up. And other people are like, that's not Coke.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's
but
right.
But I mean, that's just one example. And then, of course, you're from the Midwest. I mean, in Ohio, and I think so in Michigan as well, but certainly in Ohio, when you don't understand what somebody said, you want them to repeat. You say, please. And a lot of people are like, huh? Who says please? Well, Germans say please. It comes from bitteschön, because you don't understand somebody. And so many Germans populated there, particularly Cincinnati and Ohio, that it just became part of the vernacular. So back to your point, Joe, there's a lot of diversity amongst Americans of all ethnicities, even of groups who look the same and appear the same. And it's quite a fascinating place. And what I find interesting, Joe, is those who retain their cultural traits. So, for instance, the Amish, the Mennonites, the old Mexican, Spanish-American families in Santa Fe and San Antonio who've retained that culture for 400 years, and they've inculcated in their progeny. It's important to them. And the same sort of thing happens.
It was something we had noticed on the trip with all the veterans. There's some of the other guys who have similar Northern European backgrounds as my family, and just some of the way that some of the other vets would talk or little pet expressions they had reminded me of my uncles, or my uncle and or other cousins. And just kind of, it's interesting how the culture might endure despite change of place and change of language, little cultural tics that people develop. So that's just kind of interesting.
No, absolutely. And what happens is over time, of course, I've studied lots of languages and cultures, but over time, a lot of these things just become so ingrained in a culture, no matter which direction it goes. So for instance, French is a Germanic language, but it's not anymore. It's a Romance language now, but there are antecedent roots of when it was a Germanic language that are still in the language. And a lot of French don't know why they speak the way they do, but if you study the language, like, that comes from when it was a German language. It's fascinating.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So I learned to speak Spanish in Spain. I learned to speak Italian in Italy. I did try to learn French in high school, and I only used it in Quebec City once. And that was mainly to make out the proper change. But I do like trying to learn languages. I think they're fascinating, and they open an entire new cultural insight. There's certain concepts you can only think in other languages. And I think John Paul II, the Pope, back when I was a kid, he had an expression, and that was that each culture has a special insight into the things of God that are unique to that own culture. And that's why it's important for us to know so many different languages and cultures, so that we can have access to those insights. And maybe that's one of the kind of the blessings of diversity, if you will.
No, actually, I think it's a good point, Joe, because you're right. When I speak in German, I also think in German. And obviously, German isn't like English, because sometimes you have to wait 20 minutes for the verb to show up at the end of the sentence.
That's right.
So you've got to have the ability to retain that thought for that long to listen to somebody, or even construct that sentence. But
right.
No, your point is well taken, is that other languages, and that's one of the reasons why I became fascinated with other languages. Not that it was easy or it came naturally to me. I suppose, it got easier as I became more of a polyglot. But for me, it's like people think differently in other languages. And if you understand their language at least a little bit, you start to understand how people think the way they do, because it's a different approach.
That's right. And that's why the liberal arts, or the Great Books program, like Wyoming Catholic College does, is so important for a foundation for your subsequent career or your subsequent life. The ability to think in another language creates empathy, and it creates this insight into another perspective, another way of looking at things that I think are really important. And, as a Christian, our Lord spoke different languages. He spoke Aramaic, he spoke Hebrew, he must have spoken Latin and Greek just to deal with the Romans and the people of his day. So our Lord himself spoke different languages and could deal with other people according to how they're coming at him. So far from being, in a little cul-de-sac culturally, he was multicultural. And the Western civilization, if you will, has always, until just recently, been a culture that fostered this multilinguistic pedigree, fostered this ability to think outside the little box of your own little ethnicity or nationality. It's really only a modern phenomena where the educated man lost the ability to speak in a foreign language. Like Latin, all our founding fathers spoke Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, all of them. They all knew how to speak French. That was just common. La lingua franca, that's how you did business. So what the college is trying to do here is to reacquaint people with that idea that you can speak multiple languages, see things from different perspectives. You can learn from the past. And because you can, now you can go forward into the future and do new things like what we went on, a kind of a brand new idea, but it was possible because we had that perspective.
No, it's interesting you say that, Joe, because I remember, but before I answer this, Vutsarko, who's one of the viewers here, who comes on the channel a lot, but I should let you know, Joe, just so you're aware of it, I put Wyoming Catholic College's emblem up there on the screen, so it's just to the right of you. It looks actually quite lovely where it's at. It's on a field of yellow grass, so, but it's beautiful.
Okay.
But I've just put it up since that's where we work at, and we'll get to that in a second. But Vutsarko, he said, is that why you started learning Afrikaans, to better understand them? That's exactly right. I started self-teaching myself Afrikaans in the mid-1980s, and of course, the first question I got was, what are you, a racist? I'm like, okay, well, first off, if that's your first response, you're not very well informed. What do you mean? Well, the majority of people who speak the language as a first language are not even white, and I'm inferring that you're implying that it's a white racist language, which is nonsense.
Right.
Most first language speakers of the language are actually mixed race, or as we say, colored in South Africa. So, in fact, Vutsarko, that's exactly why I started to learn Afrikaans, but also because I already spoke German and English, and if you speak German and English, it's easier to learn Afrikaans because there's so many similarities. I mean, the word for water in Afrikaans is, are you ready for this, Joe? It's water. Whereas in German, it's Wasser, but anyway, Wasser, so I look at Afrikaans and I either see German or I see English and I can put it together. Now, pronouncing it's a different story altogether, but that's exactly why I started learning Vutsarko. Now, Joe, let me mention this. So my father, I had a conversation with him before he passed away a few years back, and we were talking about education. This was because I noticed that my sister and my brother didn't get civics in school anymore. They canceled that. And then my younger brother didn't even get American government to graduate high school. I'm like, what? So my father, we were talking about languages, and I said, so what was your academic program like in high school? Mind you, a public school in Maryland and one in D.C. He went to South Baltimore High School, I think it was. He said, oh, we studied Greek and Latin, and I had to take a foreign language. I'm like, excuse me, I thought you said foreign language. You just took Greek and Latin. Oh, no, those are classical languages. They were required. The foreign language I took was French. I was like, what? Because Greek and Latin are classical languages, and they were part of an expectation of a proper education, even in public schools back in the 50s. And that's just how far we've come.
I mean, very few people understand it that in the colonies, the American colonies, literacy was at over 95%. And that was without a national education association. That was without a federal government, without all the bureaucrats. It wasn't publicly funded education for the most part. It was homeschooling or it was private academies. All the big, Princeton, Yale, Harvard, those were all seminaries. They were all privately funded schools to help raise clergy. And the idea that an educated clergyman had to know how to read the original documents in the original language. That was the mark of an educated man. The so-called genius eggheads of the Jacobin Revolution, they were the beginning of the end, where they wanted to cut people off from the past so that they could create a fantasy present based on a fantasy future. And, all the talk about their intellectual genius is just that. It's talk. Once you get people into a debate on the merits, very quickly you find out that what passes for an erudite, educated modern really doesn't hold a candle to what our ancestors were at, what level at. I mean, we have higher technology, we have better tools, but dollars to donuts, apples to apples, compare a modern, highfalutin secular Westerner with any of their ancestors, there's no contest. So getting into language, being able to read the original documents in the original languages brings you into a whole world of empathy and insight that your peers won't have. And it's a shame, but it's something that we're working on to promote. The more educated a man is, the more empathetic he tends to be, if he's moral.
No, that's a fair point if he's moral. But it's interesting. I have to say this, Joe, and then I want to get back to just seminary just briefly, just on a point. But would it be amazing if Twitter and Parler and Facebook were around when the founding fathers were around? Could you imagine? the illustrious tweets that would come out, and people would be having these philosophical debates, and it would be just so fascinating to see. It would be, but just let's make a counterfactual and bring all the founding fathers to the 21st. Never mind the fact they'd all lose their minds about what's happening in America today, but let's bring them in and give them all the social media tools. It would just be unbelievably fascinating. But the seminary point I want to bring up is not to ask you about seminary, but just to give people a little hint and a taste for tomorrow. So as I understand it, my guest for tomorrow was with you at seminary. That would be Eric Bello.
We were not in the same time. I joined before he did.
Oh, okay.
The order, the organization was pretty big. There was hundreds and hundreds of Americans. So I was a couple of years ahead of him. But when he came along, I knew of him and I saw him around the building, if you will. We weren't directly in the same group. But he was always a good kid, seeing him grow up. And I think he joined when he was fairly young. He was definitely younger than me when he joined. And then I went off to Rome and I kind of lost track of him. So it had been years. I hadn't seen him before this trip to Wyoming. I hadn't seen him in probably 25 years.
Wow. Well, I'm glad you found a way to either reach out to him or stay in touch with him. Because, listen, I mean, Joe, let me get your thoughts on this real quick. Not to spend a lot of time talking about Eric, because we'll do that tomorrow for those who can tune in for that. But for those who don't know, Eric Bello is a professional actor and a photographer. He has appeared on Good Girls, MacGyver, The Walking Dead. Fascinating guy. But this is what I have to say about him, Joe. What a brilliant get for the trip. This guy is so enthusiastic, so positive, that, I mean, I could have tripped and broken my leg and Eric would have come along and I probably would have felt better just because he was there. That's what I have to say about Eric. He's infectious.
No, he's a great guy. He's a great guy. And it was an accident of LinkedIn. In fact, I got every day I get requests, people, wanting me to link with them. Mm-hmm. And I got this LinkedIn request from somebody out in Utah that I had no idea, who that person was. But the person we knew in common was Eric Bello. And I was like, oh, Eric Bello, I know that name. And I clicked on it and I reconnected with him through LinkedIn. I had lost track of where I knew he was an actor and I knew he had got married down through the years, but I didn't know anything else about him. And I hadn't either lost touch on Facebook or just lost touch, period. And so it was probably about 6 months ago, I reconnected on LinkedIn and I was already thinking about doing this trip for the veterans. Mm-hmm. But I kind of filed it in the back of my head until there was a moment where we were trying to fundraise for this trip. And someone said, well, hey, we would support you, but not the first year. Take some footage of it, take some, proof of concept. And once you do that, then come back next year with your photos and videos. So I started looking around for a videographer and a photographer and, it cost an arm and a leg. And I was trying to think, well, who do I know who's a really good photographer? And Eric's name popped up. So I thought, oh yeah, Eric, I haven't talked to him in ages, but I reached out to him and we started talking and the rest is history. And it worked out so well. I'm just so pleased with his work. His photos are fantastic, as you know, and the video from the event, really good. So I'm looking forward to putting something together with him.
No, that's going to be absolutely amazing. So let me just a little bit of housekeeping real quick. And I can't say hi to everybody, but I did see a new username show up here and it says melancholy_incorporated. And someone says, just saying Chris knows me, but I don't want to tell who I am. Anyway, so we'll leave that state secret there. But you do know I used to work in intelligence, so that won't be hard for me to figure out. But I'm just saying. No, but anyway, so welcome to Melancholy Incorporated and everybody who's in the stream right now. Thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate it. But Joe, you and I know each other initially from LinkedIn. Do you recall how we connected on LinkedIn? Because I think you reached out to me.
About 2 years ago, a retired SEAL reached out to me, and he had just got done burying two of his brothers SEALs who had committed suicide. And he had asked if the college, and I think I knew him because I had promoted the college. And one of the things that the college runs is Corps expeditions. And one of the things that Corps does is help this charity called White Hearts, which takes wounded veterans into the backcountry for essentially a trip like what we did. Mm-hmm. But White Hearts is a very good charity, but it's not a particularly religious charity. So he was asking, well, would you do anything that would be more religious, more Catholic, more about spiritual warfare, can address the issue of spiritual warfare? So that got me on this long journey of trying to put something together that would answer that request. And I went to LinkedIn and just started kind of the shotgun approach, trying to find people who are military and who could be good consultants. And I think you were one of about 120 of the 120 people I connected with. I think you're one of them. And so we made that first initial connection. And then I found out just a little bit more about you. And I'm like, okay, I filed your name away as a potential speaker or consultant. And as we got closer to the actual event, your name kept coming to the fore as someone I really needed to reach out to and recruit, because of how eclectic and broad your experience in the military was, and all the things you're doing now. And so one of the topics that we were trying to talk about was post-military life and career and balance. And of the list of guys that I had, your name, was up there, your profile and what you're capable of. So that's our backstory.
Yeah, and then also, Joe, you reached out to me a couple of times. We actually talked earlier this year before this lockdown nonsense got started. I'm sorry, I guess I disclosed my views on it, but before all this COVID response took place, you and I chatted several times. Of course, I exercise every day, either running or walking, and actually, like, are you free for a call? I'm like, yeah, sure. And I was out hiking around apple orchards here in central Pennsylvania, and picking up aluminum cans on the side of the road and crushing them. and you were quite patient with me. We chatted, my goodness, for almost an hour that day, and it was a fantastic conversation. And we had a few subsequent calls after that. Then you mentioned the trip. Would you be interested? Would you be available? And it was supposed to be in June, as I recall, but because of all the issues with COVID, it got postponed until a later date. And then you came back to me and said, "Can you do it?" And I said, "Sure." And then I wasn't sure if I was involved or not, but it all worked out, and it was amazing. So, so Joe, let's
and just to interrupt a little bit, for the people listening. The concept, I mean, a lot of people have heard about wounded warriors and helping veterans, and that's all well and good. Our perspective, especially with this SEAL, and as we looked into it, was not that veterans, especially special forces guys, our attitude is not that you're broken toys and that you're objects of pity. Our kind of ethos and the way we look at things, just from our perspective, because it's the great books, liberal arts, kind of broad stream perspective of history and languages and different things, is that you guys are among the best men our civilization have ever produced. So far from being objects of pity, we look to you guys as the seed corn for this civilian life. Like, we need guys like you. And in that particular call, and I've talked to other guys before and since, guys like you are steady hands, and you're well thought out. You don't do anything hastily. You don't shoot from the hip. And so it was really helpful for me to reach out to you and ask for advice. And you gave me really good advice. And we won't get into it here, but that was a proof of the concept, in a sense, of our attitude, to say, yeah, you guys have a lot to offer. And in many ways, your glory days are not behind you. They're ahead of you, and for our good.
Well, that's very kind of you, Joe. I actually, the conversation is so enjoyable for me, just to use the socialist phrase, a fellow traveler. I felt like I had a fellow traveler with me there. But no, I forgot that you did ask me about advice. That's kind of what the call was about initially. But I mean, I just thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. So listen, why don't we stop teasing the audience and get into this? Okay. So sure. Joe, you are the inspiration, unless I got this wrong, behind this whole thing. What made you think about doing something for special operations veterans and for veterans in general? And you just kind of alluded to a little bit, we're not broken toys. You want to reinforce this, but I mean, there must have been something more than that. Obviously, your father served in uniform, so.
Right. I think so. The college is a unique college. There's no other college like it on the planet, for starters. So there is no other place on the planet that combines the great books program with an equestrian program and with an outdoor program like Corps Expeditions. There's nobody comes close. So as a fundraiser, and that's my job, I'm a major gift fundraiser. I raise money for scholarships and for endowments and things like that. I'm constantly telling the story of what the college does, what the college is, what the kind of the vision statement is. The founders of the college actually came out with a 54-page philosophical vision statement that's on the website. And with a master's degree in philosophy, I read that document years ago before I came out here to work, and I was stunned. And I laughed. I told my wife, it looks like someone was writing their doctoral dissertation on what the ideal place would be. And it couldn't possibly exist. So I came out here. Yep, it sure does exist. And so trying to sell the college, if you will, to other people got me thinking of all the different communities and constituencies that might really benefit from what this college can bring to bear. And one of those was the SEAL who asked, could we help with guys in transition who are not wounded. They're not TBIs or PTSD. They're normal guys who are otherwise healthy, but what they're dealing with is an existential question. What is my life for now that I'm no longer serving? Who am I? A husband, father, citizen, neighbor, brother, son, child of God. What does this all mean? What should I do now? And I thought, I think, as an outsider looking in, and I'm an Eagle Scout, I worked abroad, I was a missionary. I didn't get the same education these students are getting. And I certainly wasn't a Corps missionary, but I have just a little bit of enough of a perspective in my own life to understand what this place could do. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, I think we can help these guys. They're asking a very specific question about life. And I think, if anything, the great books should have something to say to these men, and not just to say to them as objects of pity, but as something to say to them that will help them be the leaders of tomorrow, the civilian leaders of tomorrow that we desperately need. So that was kind of the core nugget. It's something that the idea that we have the solution, it's just an outside the box solution, if you will. We're just looking at it from a different perspective. The answers to what ails us is among us. We just have to find them and give them encouragement. That's kind of an insight, and it's been borne out in talking to so many of you veterans, where you were officers, you were majors, colonels, captains. You were somebody important in the military, and then you come out and you become just Joe citizen, and the temptation is just to melt away and no longer think of yourself as the guy with the answers, because you're so awed by the chaos of civilian life. And yeah. But all it takes is asking the right question, and we get the download, which are very well thought out, very considerate, very based on your own experience. And so I think that's kind of the proof of concept, that you guys have a lot to offer. We need to be asking the right questions, and to the degree we offer help through the Great Books program, through the philosophy, theology, humanities, the kind of the patrimony of the Western world that we're experts in, to the degree we're helping you just with the transition. Once you guys get through that choppy waters, things get much better. And I think that's the intuition, and I think that's what we're finding. So we're not, we're not putting you guys on life support. If anything, we're just giving you a helping hand for a very short period of time. And then, you guys become great citizens, fellow civilians.
That's awesome, Joe. So Shack Dweller, I saw your question for Joe. I'll get to it in a little bit. I'm just looking for the right moment where it fits in. It was a question about missionary work, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But yeah, Joe, I think it kind of really what you're talking about is letting vets know that there's still something in the tank. You've got something to contribute. I have to share this with you, Joe, is that when I was a young enlisted soldier, I was on the division color guard for the 8th Infantry Division in Germany, which is quite an honor. And I carried the national colors, which for me was awesome. That's all I wanted to do was carry the colors, which was actually a good deal because the Army flag is heavy and it has to dip when you the national colors never dip, and they don't have all those. Right. The Army has 187 campaign streamers, so it's like, oh, as you lean forward. But I was very happy to carry the national colors. But one of the things we did in Germany, and of course, back at this time, there were tens of thousands of retired veterans who lived in Germany who just wanted to live there or married a German or something like that. Mm-hmm. And on the Division Color Guard, we would bury a dozen or so veterans every year, not from suicide or something like that, but people who got out of uniform, and within 6 months to a year and a half, they had lost their sense of purpose. Their health felt ill. They didn't take care of themselves. And because of a long life in which they put a lot into it, but some of them I want to say was kind of despair. Mentally concerned about I'm not in charge anymore. I'm not responsible for all these things or all these people's lives, and not really knowing what to do themselves. And it was really sad, especially sergeants major, senior enlisted soldiers. Yeah. I remember very specifically, like in 1986, burying at least a dozen sergeant majors who died in Germany, which is a phenomenal number. Now, none of those were suicides, but the point is back what you're talking about is that sense of purpose isn't there anymore. It was so I guess for me, seeing that as a young man and remembering that and latching on to seeing what happens to people when they leave service, it doesn't necessarily go good. It always stuck with me, and that's kind of why my approach to retirement has been very different since the outset.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I was really interested in having you come out and be cadre. So our kind of idea with this particular group was the college would provide the venue. Through our core missionaries, we would provide the outdoor experience. We would provide some of the insights from the Western canon, if you will. And so we talked about Cincinnatus, the Roman general, who he was a glorious hero of Rome after his military career. Mm-hmm. And then he just went back to the farm. So he became leader of Rome, solved a problem, went back to the farm because his identity was as a citizen, as a husband, as a father, as a farmer, and not wrapped up in the military uniform. So we talked about that. We talked about some of the other, the founders of the Jesuit was a military man who was, his career was stopped short by a cannonball. And because of his convalescence, he developed the spiritual exercises, which went on to found the Society of Jesus. So he's known to history as St. Ignatius of Loyola. Very few people realize that he was a soldier, and much of his spirituality is a very soldier-like spirituality. St. Francis of Assisi was a soldier, and he too experienced battle. And this is battle in the 13th century, so that's hand-to-hand combat. He experienced battle. He was captured, and during his convalescence in captivity, that's where he had his experience of God. And he's come down to history as the founder of the Franciscans. So the idea that your glory days are ahead of you, not behind you, the idea that you have much to offer the rest of us, that we need you, I think is a very helpful idea to promote. And it's something that I think was very, it fit well with what CORE does and what the Wyoming Catholic College does, and it seems to answer a need or tapping into something, especially in the Special Forces community. But I think any community that's really hard charging, where you live in a very tight knit brotherhood for years and years of intense combat or intense emotional investment, and the temptation is that your entire identity is just wrapped up in the mission. And once you have no mission, you have no identity.
Judge Doom's Jury of Sin, that's the username here, by the way. Judge Doom's Jury of Sin says that St. Francis of Assisi was a soldier, ? Wow. He used to pray to the birds and squirrels. I didn't realize he prayed to the birds and squirrels. That's a new one on me. But
no, not really. He considered all of creation brothers and sisters.
Okay. Maybe
so
that's where the
think about it this way.
Yeah.
When you're a soldier and you consider all fellow creatures just fellow creatures, so, the bad guys are coming at you with 1,000-man army, and you just laugh at them and say, you're just my brothers and sisters. Or Leviathan, the communist empire. Well, it's just a creature. At the end of the day, what are we're worried about the times changing. Well, what are the times? They're just the opinions of the elite that we happen to have in our day and age. And whatever the moral standards of the elites are, become the times that the rest of us have to bow down and worship. Well, why worship it? It's just people. The Soviet Union, it's just a creature. So that's kind of an insight to Franciscan spirituality, where you don't take anything too seriously as though it's a god. You don't take yourself too seriously as though you're a god. God's God, and I'm a creature. Everybody else is my brother and sister. The sun, the moon, the stars, the angels, the devils, they're all just fellow creatures. And that gives you a great calmness of your heart and your mind. So far from being a namby-pamby spirituality, the Franciscan spirituality, rightly understood, is actually pretty darn manly, and it gives you great courage, which is why the Franciscans were some of the greatest missionaries in the New World and martyrs, because the Franciscans would go to the Aztecs and say, I'm representing Jesus Christ. And they'd be crucified or killed, and they just kept coming because they weren't afraid.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
If you're do not be afraid of just fellow creatures. Be afraid of God alone. And so that's a pretty manly attitude.
No, it's interesting. I do a little bit of housekeeping real quick, Joe. So, folks, you're listening to Chris White Africa on the Adaba Africa channel here live on YouTube. I'm Chris in Central Pennsylvania. My special feature guest today is Joe Stong from Wyoming Catholic College. He's here in the window with me. And we're talking about the Special Operations Forces Veterans Trip out to Western Wyoming, sponsored by Wyoming Catholic College, and put it all together. Joe is the architect of all that. And we're just kind of having that conversation. But Joe was talking about some of these very famous people from the spiritual world who were actually soldiers, and mentioned Cincinnatus. And for those who didn't realize that Cincinnati is famous for more than just being WKRP. It's named after the Roman general Cincinnatus. So just thought I'd share that real quick. Since someone it's talked about birds and St. Francis, but I thought I'd share that about Cincinnati because a lot of people don't know. If you don't know much about history, you don't know where the name Cincinnati came from, and it's actually named after him.
Yep. Yeah, and there, George Washington and a lot of the founding fathers generation, they had the Order of Cincinnatus. That was the idea that you would serve in government and then go home back to your farm.
Yep.
That your identity as a statesman was not serving in Congress or serving as president forever and gripping onto power. The idea that no, your allegiance was to a higher authority than power. And so that order of, Cincinnati was founded clearly after the Revolutionary period in American history. It's in Ohio, so they had to, it was on the frontier at the time. But for that whole founding generation had that attitude of not grasping on power. Power. They didn't worship power.
No.
They worshiped God, and they served their fellow man. And they saw their identity as wrapped up in helping the common good, not themselves, which is an incredible, foundation to build a country on. And in many ways, the military still has retained that idea that you're serving the army, or you're serving the country. It's bigger than yourself. You're not grasping for power. That's a very Western idea. And it's good to promote that and to encourage that we return to it if we've lost that.
It's an interesting point you make, Joe, because and this is a little bit away from the trip, but since you've ventured into this lane, let's talk about it for a second. But I actually see a lot of people actually around the country, and I think it's people that just don't know our civics and don't know our system, and certainly aren't familiar with the military. But civilians, I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying this is my perception of what's going on. I see a lot of people generally concerned that, or calling for the military to be involved in this election or after the election, and that's not going to happen. This is one of the strengths of this country, is that our military, regardless of how people behave or say, or maybe some generals behave when they retire, or even some sitting in office, we don't undermine civil authority, despite this nonsense about some people disagree with me when I say the nonsense about military-industrial complex. But those who've been steeped in professionalization of the military forces understand there's no way we're ever going to violate the Constitution, and we're going to support a politician over the rule of law. Now, if we are called to duty because of a domestic insurrection, which is in line with the Constitution, it's a lawful order, then we'll step up. But no, we're not just going to step out of bounds. And a lot of people are afraid of that right now, or they're calling for it. And to me, it's very disturbing. Yeah, no, and it's unfortunate because it shows a lack of understanding of human nature and history. And one of the benefits of learning history and the unvarnished, non-propagandized history, just let's take it as it is, and then we can talk about it later. Once you learn the history of the Roman Empire, you realize once you cross the Rubicon with an army, once you overthrow the idea of civilian guidance of the military, once you say, well, we're the Praetorian Guard, we are the gatekeepers of power, and we decide, we, the deep state, we, the permanent bureaucratic class, we know better than the president. Once you make that step, then all hell breaks loose. And I think a lot of people assume, and I say this as a missionary, where you go abroad and you see what other countries have been through, civil wars, constants. Once you have one civil war, you tend to have many of them. So, Mexico, I worked in Mexico, and the modern Mexico is the result of dozens of civil wars that they fought one after the other in the late 1800s through the early 1910s. And so you had constant upheaval. And then you have this long period of dictatorship under the Partido Revolucionario Institucional, the PRI, and they were a draconian force. They were the last man standing after the last civil wars. And it doesn't do well for anybody, just ruling by sheer brute power. It's very short-sighted. And I think that learning from history, we have to learn that a little bit of humility, winner take all, is a really bad way to run countries. And again, this is another benefit of Wyoming Catholic College and how we study history, just unvarnished history without the propaganda on top. So we don't use textbooks. We use the original source. Yep. So rather than the Catholic Church's spin on X, we just read X. So if you want to learn about anything, go to the original source, read it, then we can discuss. And then we can decide, whether we disagree or not. But at least let's get the information down pat. I think I think we learn from history so we don't repeat its mistakes. No, it's interesting you mention that because let me share a little a personal experience. While I'm very grateful that in America that the military is so highly regarded by our society, and that people often are quite polite and oftentimes show deference, I also get a little concerned that at times it borders on hero worship and veneration sometimes. Like, for instance, I went to a Washington Nationals game when I was back in the States a few years back, and in the seventh inning, they said, ladies and gentlemen, we want to welcome back Staff Sergeant Dave Schmidt, who just came back from 6 weeks in Afghanistan, and everybody stands. I'm like, okay, hold on, guys. Okay, we're getting a little bit over the top here. He went there TDY. He stayed in a hotel. We appreciate his service, but it's a bit much. But so I don't want to turn that sort of thing off because it's very But I've always been a little I don't want to say embarrassed, but uncomfortable with it. But it's much better than guys coming back from Vietnam. So, but the point here is that. I've always cautioned my fellow soldiers and my peers and subordinates whenever things happen, because you get this a lot of times in the military. Oh, those damn civilians sort of thing. I'm like, okay, stop right there. Okay, unless you go out of uniform with your boots on in a coffin, you too shall become a civilian one day or another.
That's
either
right.
By leaving the service or by retiring, or you'll die in uniform. Then you don't become a civilian, but then you won't be around to understand what it's like. So remember that you're just a part of society. We are not a Praetorian Guard. We are not better than any other Americans. Now, we may commit more of ourselves, and we may do more than many people. That doesn't make us better than. And I would say that by and large, most military people recognize that. But there are a few people who get a little too big for their britches and think that we deserve deference or we deserve this, and I think most of us don't. But I've always went out of my way to make sure that people understood we are Americans just like anybody else. And whether you're a firefighter or you're a clerk in Lansing, Michigan, or you're a fundraiser at Wyoming College there in Lander, Wyoming. We're all the same, and we all bring something to the table.
Yep. That's the right attitude to have. And for those who don't, who try to come out as a 4-star general and say, "Well, I'm a general, therefore X." Well, again, liberal arts education says, "Well, thank you for your service, sir, but you still have to make a case. You still have to make a positive argument for whatever policy prescription you have, because just like the rest of us." You don't just get to give an order and we salute. As a fellow citizen, whether you're military or not, you still have to make a positive case for it. To the degree our ancestors were hep to wider cultural perspective, they did understand you actually had to be persuasive. So they learned logic and rhetoric and English and languages for that purpose, to be persuasive. And they also learned all the fallacies. And so our students learn fallacies. They learn public speaking, and they give a lot of public speaking, and they critique each other so that they don't base things on flawed reasoning or flawed fallacies, logical fallacies, or appeals to emotion or bandwagon appeal or non sequiturs or red herrings or ad hominem attacks on people like, "How dare you disagree with me, you hater?" It works until it doesn't. And when it doesn't, it really stops working.
Yeah.
It
fails miserably when it doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah.
You just
and so I mean that's
you throw all those phrases out. I love red herrings, ad hominem attacks. You didn't use begging the question, which is one of the things a lot of my students do when I've taught, is that they write something. And I'm like, okay, so what? You're kind of begging the question here. Tell the reader.
That's right.
And that's the education that the students get at Wyoming Catholic College. I suspect that your students aren't going to be leaving the reader begging the question. You're not. You're going to know what's going on.
Yeah, you have to make your case. Yeah, exactly. And it's good for you, and it's good for them. It's good for you to actually make your case for whatever it is. The classic education in the Catholic Church, using Thomas Aquinas as our exemplar, you would always do a pro and contra. So you'd have to learn both sides of the debate to make a debate. And in the Summa Theologica, it starts out with, does God exist? Well, maybe he doesn't. Let's look at the evidence. And he would line up all the evidence against the existence of God, and then he would answer it. So a good, well-trained mind or well-trained Christian could say, well, maybe Jesus isn't God. Maybe I'm completely wrong. What are the evidence? And let's get a really strong argument, not a straw man, a real one, and then we'll knock it down. And if we can knock down a strong argument, then you can definitely knock down a weak one. Whereas the modern, secular, Western mind says, no, let's make a really weak straw man and only focus on that straw man, and then declare victory and do high fives as we run off. And then we'll silence any other, voices so that no one realizes how weak our arguments are. Let's have appeals to emotion and get really angry and use anger as a proxy for winning an argument. It's just such a shame. I mean, we could do so much better. So we're trying.
Everything you've just described sounds very familiar from social media. I'm just saying, Joe. Hey, listen. Let me get Shaq Dweller's question here, since we're talking faith and you're talking about the Catholic Church a bit there, but not the Catholic Church specifically, but in general. And then we'll get back to the trip, because I want to ask you some really good questions about the trip.
Sure.
But okay, Shaq Dweller asked this question early in the stream, so I'm just getting to it. He says, "What does missionary work entail? Is it funded by the church, and how do you decide whom to help?" I assume he's asking about the Catholic Church, because I can tell you about LDS. They don't
Sure.
fund it, but they expect every young man and now every young woman to go do their 2 years of missionary work. But how does it missionary work for the Catholic Church? Is it funded by the church? And how do you decide whom to help? Good questions, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely good question. So I did missionary work in Mexico. Not every Mexican is Catholic, and I did also in El Salvador. And what we did was fund lay catechists. So we weren't funding missionary orders of priests or nuns. We were funding lay people, married lay people who would function as catechists. They would teach Catholicism, the doctrine of Catholicism, to people who are already Catholic, and just help them and their families understand the faith more and live it better. So the selection was already, if you will, given. It was a Catholic parish, several hundred families, catechesis, Sunday school, if you will, teaching them how to appreciate the faith. If they're going to live it, they need to know it, and introduce them to our Lord through the scriptures and the sacraments and the public prayer and other forms. The why, our Lord, when he was alive, he sent out 72 disciples, and he told them to heal the sick, cast out evil spirits, and preach the gospel. And so the missionary endeavor is just doing that. If you can only preach the gospel if you first try to heal what ails people. So you take care of their body, take care of their mind, take care of their souls. If you help liberate them from whatever struggles they're dealing with. If you don't do that first, if you just go straight to evangelism, preaching the word, it's not going to be as effective as if you first help them out charitably. And so that's what we did as well. So we would always try to help. In El Salvador's case, we helped provide humanitarian relief after their big earthquake. We try to help them spiritually with their various struggles. And they have a lot of struggles in El Salvador after the war, a lot of orphans, a lot of trauma. And so we helped with that. And then we helped with their catechesis.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So, hey, let's shift a little bit about the trip then, okay?
Sure.
What was your most poignant memory or thing you'll remember the most from this trip?
I think it was really fun to see the chemistry of everyone, because we had thought about it so long. We'd consulted with so many different veterans, those who came and those who didn't. We try to imagine what it would be like, how the talks would go down, the different themes that we covered each day. I think my most fond memory was just overhearing conversations between the SEALs and the Army, and they were kind of just comparing notes, and they were giving each other advice. Yeah. And I thought, that's it. That's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to create the venue or create the occasion of grace, if you will. Mm-hmm. We're just providing the space or the occasion where these guys, they're very qualified men, mm-hmm. are helping one another. And so it was a conversation of somebody had been out and settled, and he was helping a brother of his from a different service who was just on the cusp of coming out, who had just retired. And I thought, yeah, that's right. I think we're doing it right.
No, I think that was awesome. But I thought maybe you were going to talk maybe about, I don't know, something.
That was an easy one. That was a layup. I just took that for granted. That was fun.
For those who don't know, I'll let Joe describe it.
So our core missionaries are excellent young people, and they take various different groups into the backcountry all the time. And one of the things that they've invented all sorts of games to play around the campfire, to kind of break the ice and get people laughing. And they introduced these high powered, high qualified men who are 30-year veterans of the Navy SEALs or Delta Force or Rangers. You have the very what's the word? I can't think of the word. They're very heroic, but men you wouldn't expect to just let loose. But in hindsight, it makes perfect sense. They're great guys. So they introduced them to this silly game where you sit around in a circle and you basically it's like a game of chicken where you're doing various signs and sounds in a rapid fire round robin until someone makes a mistake, and then they're out of the game. And so it becomes very competitive very quickly. And to see a dozen guys just roaring their heads off laughing was really fun. That was probably the funnest moment on the trip, but the most gratifying was seeing the chemistry and the dynamic between the different guys.
No, it was pretty awesome. But yeah, I think you're right. That was I wasn't prepared for that to be such a entertaining and enjoyable moment. But I guess maybe I'm biased because Joe, who won the last game?
Well, it was it's been said that core missionaries always win, and because they're the experts and they were the pros, they introduced us to many other topics that we won't go into right now. That was showed that they were the experts. But at the end, when push came to shove, wisdom and age will always win out. And so we had Army versus Navy versus Corps, and Army and Navy won. Yeah. And I think you were representing Army very. And actually, you're a good representative of Army.
They told me after the fact that whoever had the least strikes against them actually won. So Army Navy won as a team, but I actually won. So I'm kind of biased. I enjoyed that game, but I mean the other part of this show is that it's pretty awesome to go out in such a majestic location and just be away from everything. And while there's a physical challenge because we're carrying 50-pound rucksacks with all this kid out there hiking up and down mountains and then camping out there. And that first night it was 8 degrees Fahrenheit. You took a picture of my beard that was sticking outside the sleeping bag. It was all ice from the moisture from my breath.
But that was day number 2. The day number 1, my cell phone, I had left it out of my mummy bag, so it froze. It wouldn't turn on.
It wouldn't turn on. It was so cold. That's right. But
that was quite something else. I'm so glad we decided to stay in the cabins one day longer and didn't try to go out the day before. I think neither of us would be here if we had tried to go out in the backcountry with those 100-mile-an-hour gale winds. But getting there after the fact, seeing the damage of the trees, rerouting to Green River Lakes, camping when it's 8 degrees, that was a real experience you only want to do once.
Well, I'm accustomed to an Army sleeping bag or my own sleeping bag, which is a bit more spacious than those little mummy bags. And so that first night, my feet were kind of hanging out the end of the tent. The wind was blowing, the temperature dropped, and my feet were freezing. I've never had cold feet, no matter how. I mean, I've been below 0 before. I haven't had cold feet because of sleep bags. But this bag was rated for 0 degrees, but it was 8 degrees, so it should have been warm. But that didn't account for the fact that moisture condensed on my feet, and it was frozen. So when I got up in the morning, I looked down, there was ice where my feet were. No wonder my feet were so cold.
Well, you'll have to ask Eric tomorrow about his experience in the mummy bag. Because it's hard to just do justice. But Eric is considerably stronger than I am, and his shoulders are probably about twice his width. And so he didn't actually fit in his mummy bag. It was too tight. And so he just by relaxing, he ripped the seams.
That's funny. I have to digress here. We'll get back to the trip in a second, but there was a question here by Dano Prinsloo. He said, he's asking someone else, why is it that Trump wants a drug test on a Sleepy Joe? He's trolling Sleepy Joe. Come on. He's getting ahead of the left who are coming up with nonsense about him every week, and he's throwing nonsense out there to throw them off their game. It's all pure politics.
There was an expression early on, and I hope I get it right, but it was that the MAGA voters take Trump seriously but not literally, whereas everyone else takes Trump literally but not seriously. So they'll say, he's lying, everything he says is a lie. Directionally he's right, but the details he doesn't really care about. Which that's an easy one. He tends to be inaccurate or exaggerated, and knowing New Yorkers, and a lot of people say, well, he's from Queens, and that's what guys from Queens do. They exaggerate, they're bombastic, they kind of make things up, but the general gist of it is right. They just get the details wrong. And people who have very short attention spans will glom onto the details and go, he missed, he's wrong in the detail, and then they'll miss the point of what he was trying to do. It's the back and forth of politics. So to a certain degree, that's unavoidable. If you don't like somebody, you're going to be hyper focused on every minor detail. But I do find it funny that so many times he's directionally right, but in the details, he's not quite accurate.
Well, I think that the case that you point out there's the perfect one is like, Mexico is going to build for the wall. I never for a microsecond thought that Mexico was going to build the wall. The point was that Donald Trump is going to take our sovereignty seriously, first person in decades to do it. That was the point. But no, Mexico hasn't paid for the wall. Yeah, okay, well, that's not to keep me from voting for the guy. Come on, wake up. So listen, Joe.
That's interesting.
The trip was it was unbelievable. It was fascinating. Like I said, the outdoor environment, and I don't think we could have picked it. I mean, it wasn't the original intent. Let's tell people this. So originally we had this very, I don't want to say grueling because we never completed, but based on the number of trees we had to go around and over, I think it would have been grueling if we'd had the original trek and going up to 13,000 feet and coming back down. But to let people know, we took off we stayed overnight, one more night at the ranch because there was a horrible storm that came. There was snow and wind. And then it's a good thing, as we found out, we talked to a couple who stayed in the woods that night, and they were terrified. Trees fell all around them, and it didn't look like it was a windstorm. It looked like a tornado actually whipped through there and tore all the trees down. I
think so. I think it was either straight line winds or it was gusts in excess of 100 miles an hour to rip those trees out.
Yeah.
I mean, when we originally were thinking about this program, we being civilians, I don't know the physical wherewithal of Navy SEALs and Green Berets and Rangers, and also the ages. We had looked at different.
I was going to say 20, 30-year-old Rangers and SEALs, but 40, 50-year-old Rangers and SEALs, a little bit different.
That's right. As it turned out, most people were in their 40s, and most of the veterans had been veterans for 20 years at least. And so they came out with, injuries. And there's one or two of the younger guys who were completely physically fit, and they would have had no trouble carrying those packs for 20 miles. The rest of us were kind of older and either in our 50s or in our late 40s. And so in hindsight, it would have been a little bridge too far probably, or would have been really grueling. Some of the guys had bad knees or ACLs had been torn earlier. And, they didn't bother telling anybody about it until we got back in the backcountry. They said, hey, just FYI, my knee's hurting. Didn't want to complain. And they didn't limp. No. So again, from a civilian perspective, I never would have known. Yeah. They just sucked it up and did it. But we never wanted to bring somebody in the backcountry and then have them get, a serious injury. And so in hindsight, that original idea was probably a bit too ambitious, plus the time involved in hiking 5 miles a day to set up a new camp and cook and all the rest of it. This was very much a prototype or a trial run, if you will.
Proof of concept.
Proof of concept, yeah. And so I think in the future, in next year, we'll probably have a larger group, slightly larger. We had 8 veterans this year. I think we're going to go for 12 next year. We'll keep the cadre concept where we have veterans who've successfully made that transition to civilian life be the ones who are actually giving the talks. So they have instant credibility. It's not Joe Stong giving a talk. It's, 20-year vet from the SEALs or 30-year vet from the Army giving a talk to their brother special forces. We would still provide the venue and the camping experience. It'd probably be a lot less of a grueling camp out. But, it was, I think as a proof of concept, what worked really worked well. And what wouldn't have worked, well, it didn't work anyway because the trees blocked our path. So we ended up stumbling into the right itinerary, if you will.
Well, that's what I was going to say, just because not everybody knows, not everybody watches every stream. So we went up to 10,000 feet and parked the vehicles in the National Forest, at the Bridger National Forest in the southwestern portion of the Wind River Range in Wyoming. We're down there, and we started hiking up, and I was up near the front, and we went about 200 meters, went around the curve, and there's a tree. Okay, no big deal. So we went around it.
A tree across the trail.
Across the trail.
We're walking through a forest, so the trees are all like this, and then we see this a blockage of trees that would have stopped a tank. Exactly. So we go around that one, and we get to another one.
And we're like, it's no big deal. But we traveled 3.5 miles up the trail. But I'm telling you, we walked about 6 miles because we had to go above or below, up and down, around. And then we got up to a point where there were just so many trees. It was kind of like a grove. And it was like Paul Bunyan was on a drunken rage and he got through there and just knocked down all the trees, you know? It was like, that's, so I was looking for Babe the Blue Ox, you know? Anyway, so we took a break, and then our guides, the missionary from court, went out 3 directions to try to find a path. Meanwhile, some smaller groups came up behind us and they passed through. Hey guys, we'll catch you later. I think we were like a half a mile from our destination at that point. And then I started seeing those groups filter back, and they're like, oh no, we couldn't get through, man. It's impassable. Then eventually our missionary guides came back and they're like, we're going to turn back. So then we had to go back down the mountain for the 3.5 miles, back and forth like this. And I have to say this, Joe, we were blessed, or somebody was watching out for us, because I was concerned that somebody was going to twist an ankle or pull something, because it was not easy. But we got back down. Everybody was in good spirits, and that's when we ran into the couple that said, we were here in the woods last night. We were terrified. Because they said it was like a
and just so people know, I mean, there were times when the trees were literally like this across the trail, and we would have to climb up each of these logs were like 3 feet thick. They were huge trees. Mm-hmm. And so you'd have to climb on them, precariously with a 60-pound pack on your back and trying to not fall down. We could have easily messed up a knee, an ankle, broken a leg if we had collapsed or fallen through. It was just a matter of time before we got hurt. And once you're hurt, trying to, manhandle and carry somebody out, that would have been really hard. So it worked out for the best. Of course, we missed that we started out, people flew into Jackson Hole. We drove them to our ranch. We had a nice dinner. We got welcome to the state of Wyoming, and I'm a booster for the state. So I made sure to front load a lot of welcome to the state, and from various dignitaries, which I hope you'll have in your show. And then we had a cowboy action shooting. So kind of as an icebreaker. Again, as civilians, we're trying to think, well, how do we welcome these guys to Wyoming and give them a taste of Wyoming? And how do we kind of break the ice between Army versus Navy? And I hadn't fully appreciated the game. So we had the cowboy action shooting. We had these gentlemen from all over the state who are world-class cowboy action shooters.
Competition.
And they have all the gear, they have the guns, they have lever actions and single action pistols and shotguns, and they have the whole persona of cowboys. They came out. One of the sports clubs out of Jackson Hole donated the targets. They lent the targets to us, and that was a godsend. We had gentlemen from and his son from Casper, Bob Bailey and his son came over from Casper. They're world-class cowboy action shooters. They're friends of theirs from Rock Springs. They came out and gave the veterans a real good introduction to cowboy action shooting. And Chris, you're a pretty good shot, I have to say. Tell the people in South Africa, you know your business around a lever action, sir. Well, you're quite impressive.
Well, thank you. I was actually, not to boast, but with the Winchester 73, I was all over that. And it wasn't like, boom. It was like, but we have to be honest, Joe. When it came to the revolver, because I'm accustomed to like a 9mm or 45, the revolver, I hadn't fired a revolver in a while, and I did well except for one target. I missed the same target on every table. It didn't matter what I did to go slow, to catch my breath, because I would slow down, and it was like I psyched myself out. There were 5 targets, and no matter what the pattern was for the revolver, I missed the second to the right target every time. I blame it on my floaters in my eye. That must have been what it was.
Well, that's probably what it was. And of course, for the people at home, the targets were not these nice square targets. Yeah. They were in the shape, the irregular silhouette of a cowboy's with a hat on. So that was kind of daunting. Some guys just winged him, hit him in the nose or hit him in the brim of his hat.
They got the top of the hat, right?
That's
right. No, but the Winchester, though, I hit every one of those dead center, like right in the throat. So I love the Winchester. That was a lot of fun. And then we fired a shotgun as well. One time I fired the shotgun and I hit it. And I know these are heavy steel targets. That must have been a lot more powder in that round because I fired it and it flipped it over.
Yep, that was right. So that was really a good icebreaker we had on Tuesday morning. So everyone flew on a Monday. Then on Tuesday we had that cowboy action shooting. That went really well. We had a Derringer experience. We could shoot 45 caliber Derringer. That was quite a blast, literally. Yeah. And we were able to send the cowboys off with a good cheer. And then the weather had set in, so we retreated back to the cabins. We spent another couple hours resupplying with warmer gear, preparing for colder weather than we had expected, and set out on Wednesday. So we went from Wednesday to Sunday in the backcountry of Wyoming, up by Green River Lakes. And in a lot of the photos that you've shown, it's the famous Square Top Mountain. Oh, yeah. What you cannot see unless you have to drive about an hour and a half on a bumpy road to get to a parking lot, and then walk to really experience that mountain. It's one of the most photographed mountains in the state. It looks like Devil's Tower.
It does look like Devil's Tower, but it's of course, Devil Towers is more kind of round because it's the cinder that's left from a volcano. But yeah, it does remind me of that. And of course, the Devil's Tower, for those who don't know the story of America, the Native American tale is that's from a bear. The bear was trying to climb Devil's Tower, and his claws left those marks. But actually,
and it looks like a gigantic tree stump.
Actually, it does. Square Top Mountain does look like a gigantic. It looks like a petrified tree stump, and hey, that would be a heck of a tree.
That's right. That's right. So beautiful countryside. It's just gorgeous alpine meadows, and so it's a great venue to sit and talk about the purpose of life, balance now that you're a husband and a father in a post-military career. Talk about spiritual warfare. We had one of our chaplain was himself a military veteran, and he was in special forces.
I was going to mention
so he himself had that experience.
Yep. So we actually had a Catholic priest who was a special forces veteran. That was really cool.
Yeah. So we were able to do that, and then we had talks that Chris gave and helped give on networking and post-military careers. So we had a really good mix, and it was 50% Catholic, 50% non-Catholic as a group, which added a good kind of camaraderie to the whole bit. We had fishing, and next year I think I'm going to bring in a lot of different types of lures and different rigs.
I've told people about the fishing, how it didn't go so well until the guy showed up with his son and his daughter-in-law. In 15 minutes, they caught 6 fish, and everybody's like, what the heck?
That's right. So I gave one of the special forces I said, listen, I've spent $500 on these out-of-state licenses. You guys have got to catch a fish. Come on, let's not. And I think I mentioned one of the guys, even if you have to catch them with your bare hands, go ahead and do it. And we came back from one of our day hikes, and sure enough, he had a fish. So I don't know if it was he took me up on that, or
well,
maybe.
It's funny you mentioned that, Joe, because were you down there when the moose came? I think you were down there, weren't you?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
So I was the furthest away from the bridge. I think you might have been on the bridge or near the bridge when it happened. But yeah. I mean, I was joking with these guys all the time, like, just jump in the water. There's so many salmon in there, you're bound to have one slip into your boot or something. Just grab one.
Right.
And so I'm sitting down there, and then and our Catholic priest was, I think he was reading scripture or something like that. He's just relaxing along the river. It was beautiful and quiet. Now the other people were up the hill doing the game, and we were down there that evening, and I sat a little further down so I didn't disturb the father there, and I was just relaxing, waiting to take some good pictures of the sun going down, and I hear this splashing in the water, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they actually jumped in the river to get a fish, and then I hear somebody on the bridge going, shh, guys. I'm like, okay, what's going on? So I look over and like, come up. It might have even been you. I don't recall. Come up. So I come up, and there's the moose coming across. There are 4 moose. Yeah. I missed the first one, the juvenile, that was already across. But then I got my camera out, and I got the 2 cows, and then we hear this. I'm like, that's a bull moose, man. And he came out of the woods, and he came across. Yeah. It was. I'm so glad
for your South African listeners. Yeah. It's important for them to know that moose are more dangerous than bears, especially big daddy mooses. And you'd think that the plural of moose would be mice, no. But it's not. It's moose.
It's moose.
More people get killed by moose every year than by bears because they're the size of a horse or bigger, and they're very aggressive. If you get in their way, especially with their babies, they'll just bum rush you and stomp you to death. So outdoorsmen in the backcountry, I mean, you really don't have the ability to just shoot one. I guess you could, but when you've got 2,000 pounds of fury coming your way and knocking trees over to get to you, really you got to run and hide. And that's, we saw those 4 moose cross the river. We all just kind of slowly sank down on the bridge and made a real low profile and watched the spectacle and Big Daddy Moose coming across. And then one of the veterans, who's a Wyoming native, he said, that big moose there, that big daddy moose, he's only half size.
Oh yeah, no. I've been in Yellowstone, and I had a moose that was 10 feet from me. He was chewing on fresh, reeds. It was springtime in Yellowstone and water, and he turned and looked at me, just kind of like, "What do you want?" But he didn't charge me like that, and I just kind of stood there and took a picture. That thing was easily twice the size of the one we saw. I was like, "Whoa, yeah." But to be fair, Joe, I mean, I shot moose with my camera.
That's right. Yeah. We all would have shot that moose had he charged the bridge. We would have all had diving shots as we're jumping off the bridge.
Well, to be fair, Joe, as I've said, when it comes to grizzly, I'm okay because I'm faster than you are. So that's your problem, Joe.
That's right. I was prepared for various contingencies. One being I might have to be the sacrificial lamb if the grizzly attacked us. I'm not sure if I would have gone down without a fight, but I definitely would have gone down.
Yeah, no, but Shactwell just said he watched a video of moose trampling people into into a pulp. They are very dangerous. But I suspect that the moose there, because even though it's remote and it's not there's a human habitation there. There technically is human habitation because there's people camping out there all the time, especially in the summer. So I think these moose are accustomed to seeing lots of people passing on the trails.
Right.
But we saw, so just before we wrap up here, Joe, we saw, I actually went to answer the call of nature once, number one. So went to answer the call of nature, and I'm standing there and I hear this flapping, and I look up and a peregrine falcon comes and lands on a dead tree just above my head. But I didn't have my phone. It was the one time I didn't have my phone. And then there was like a pair of them. So the other one landed on the tree. So peregrine falcon, we saw pronghorn antelope in the valley out ahead of that. We saw the salmon there. We saw bald eagles, a nesting pair of bald eagles, which Eric Bello and I, we'll talk about that tomorrow. He and I were down there one morning and we saw the one because he's like, "Hey, there's an eagle." And then we followed it as it took off. He got it in flight. And then the next day, the second one came along. It was wonderful. We didn't see the grizzly, but we ran into a hiker who was ready for the bush because he was in camouflage. He had like a 38 strapped to his pistol belt. And he comes down and goes, "Yeah, no, there's a bear with a kill up there a few miles down the road there. And I'd suggest staying off the trail." And we're like, "Yeah, okay, dude, we got that." And then we saw the moose. And it was quite amazing. All this wildlife was quite interesting.
Yeah, the college goes out in that same mountain range all the time, and we've yet to have any negative encounter with wildlife. So we had bear protocol. The core missionaries taught us well. Everybody in our group had a can of bear spray, so we were well prepared in that quarter. But yeah, it's Wyoming is a great place to see wildlife like that up close and personal. And as long as you know how animals behave and you take just kind of common sense precautions, you won't really have any trouble. Don't smear salmon on your neighbor's tent at night. Don't keep salmon in your backpack when you go to sleep. Things like that. That's kind of common sense, right? You'll avoid having a bear visitor if you do things like that. So use a bear fence. A lot of common sense things, but the specialty at Core was to bring people out in the backcountry, see the wonder of nature and wildlife, and bring them back safely. So, and we've been doing that for I think 6 or 7 years now with Core. So we're hoping to do that again next year with the veterans. We're hoping to, just recruit veterans on LinkedIn or just word of mouth. We're looking for cadre volunteers, guys who can give good example and talk to their brothers. And then guys who are just in the cusp of coming out, retiring and facing the uncertainty of civilian life, and be open to something that we provide. But it's also the friendships. I think one of the takeaways from this trip is the friendships developed on this trip, and hopefully that'll endure and go into the future. And I know just among themselves, various veterans that attended have already been reaching out to each other and helping each other, with business or with family, and getting to know each other as men, as guys. And that's very good. I think that's also a benefit of doing something like this, and to have different services. So Navy and Army. We did have a Marine who was going to be involved. He had to back out at the very last minute. We've hoped to find some Air Force PJs. I don't know if Space Force will have a special forces unit, but I guess we might have to add that to the lineup.
I think Space Force is a special forces unit. That's just me. I already have my Space Force flag, and I'm not kidding. As soon as it was released, I ordered one. Of course, unfortunately, it comes from China, but it is a Space Force flag.
Yeah.
But Space Force is that will be 50 years from now. That'll be one of the legacies of Donald Trump that people will remember and go, "Wow, this was prescient." This guy thought ahead and realized that space was a venue for competition, and the U.S. need to get out in front of that.
Yep.
So pretty cool stuff.
Yep.
But they just make fun of him now. But they made fun of Seward's Folly. But thank goodness we bought Alaska from the Russians, huh?
That's right. That's right.
So let me get but before
no, so it was really good. We had a good time.
Before we get out of here, Joe, I'm going to say, listen, if you invite me back out and I come back out there, next time when I hear the phrase Jolly Rancher, I'm going to pay closer attention because I thought people were just joking about having Jolly Ranchers. And for me, a guy who's still like a 15-year-old kid or 12-year-old kid with sugar and candy all the time, I actually was cold turkey out there. I didn't have any Starbucks. I didn't, Frappuccinos. I didn't have any sweets. And I'm out there and just, doing it. And then I saw somebody with a Jolly Rancher. I'm like, I thought you guys were kidding. And it turns out we could have had Jolly Ranchers. And I will carry all the Jolly Ranchers for everybody. I don't care how much they weigh. Anyway, so.
I feel really bummed out that I only had 2 tea bags in my deep emergency kit.
Yeah. By the way,
but
thank you for
that was
Joe.
good. You'll be happy to note that I am looking at recipes for pizza. And it'll be a long time before I do pizza again in the backcountry.
I told Jacob that was the worst idea ever. I mean, and it ruined because the night before we had this chicken teriyaki.
Chicken teriyaki.
Awesome. It was
chicken
awesome.
teriyaki is the way to go, man.
I will eat chicken teriyaki every night if I never have to eat that pizza again. By the way, for those who don't know, Joe cooked that pizza that night, and I didn't want to hurt Joe's feelings, so he made it for me, and I ate it. And Joe, I didn't let on that it was horrific, did I?
No, you didn't. And you did such a good job eating that pizza that I made mine exactly the same way. And I thought, wow, this is going to be great. And I took a couple of bites and I was like, oh, this is awful. I can't eat this.
I actually felt guilty because you threw the whole thing away like instantly. And I was like, oh, I should have just told him how terrible it was.
Yeah. Well, honesty is the best policy, right?
Yeah,
now, Jacob tells me that his pizza was better than mine, which is possible because he's got more experience.
No. I think there's an integrity violation here for Jacob. I don't believe that for a second.
I did go several years ago when I first moved to Wyoming. I did go camping with the students, and we did do pizza one night. And the cook, she did a phenomenal job with that pizza. It was really good. It was deep dish pizza. I don't know what she did differently, so I'm going to have to go and explore what the recipe was. But I'm thinking that there was something else missing in that the ingredients.
Yeah, there was definitely something missing. So let me do quick housekeeping. We'll wrap up here, Joe. But there's a few things unrelated to our conversation. I'll just mention them. You and I don't have to answer them. I'm going to do a little research because I didn't see some of these things with running around. By the way, my pupils have just returned to normal size after this conversation. That's good.
How many fingers am I holding up?
7 on one hand. Well, that's because you hung out at Chernobyl. That's why you have 7 fingers on one hand. But
that's right.
No, yeah. But Daniel Prinsloo, before he left because he had to take off, said, why is there no more discussion on Biden's Ukraine dealings, or was that fake news? Not fake news, but we won't get into that here. Joe and I are going to talk politics at a later stage, so come back and check it out, and we'll try to get that on before the election because we're going to, like Facebook, we're trying to influence the election, Joe and I are. But, so listen, if you take your voting advice from Facebook, you probably don't deserve the right to vote, but I'm just saying. Anyway, and then let's see what else. Judge Doom's jury of sin said, in other news, General Flynn today. I don't know what happened with General Flynn. I have to take a look at that. And then you answered the question from Tion, who's a pilot, by the way, in South Africa. Tion said, was it Army and Navy vets only? No, Joe just answered that. We had all services, obviously not Space Force, that's new, but the Marine wasn't able to come, but they were all invited. And then Shack Dweller said, won't the bear spray just piss the bear off enough to come look for revenge? No, because that's mace, but it's 20 times as concentrated as what you spray in the face of an attacker. When you hit a bear with that, they are blinded, it's screeching, and it gives you time to escape. So by the time they sort themselves out, you should be long gone, unless you're an idiot standing there watching a bear and taking videos of the bear screaming. Then you deserve your fate. Then Tion was saying, I wonder if the bears would come for the biltong. Yes, they would come for the biltong. You can't keep anything that has an unnatural smell like deodorant, shampoo, chewing gum, any of those things. You have to take those away from where you're sleeping excuse me, and put them behind a bear fence, which is located hundreds of yards from or meters from where your campsite is. And those things are electrified, so they will knock a bear on their bottom. They actually do that. Jacob told the story about they had the bear fence go off one night and they came out and they couldn't find the bear, but there's a big steaming pile of bear poo where the bear had been because the bear crapped his shorts because it was such a shock. Anyway.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
So, Joe, before we wrap up, let me ask this question. Are you satisfied with the proof of concept, and are you happy with the direction it went?
Yeah, I think I am. I think we did it. We had a after action. I called all the guys. I think there's just one guy left I need to touch base with. But the general consensus was that we did a good job. There's things we need to tighten up and do a better job as far as the preparation, the curriculum. But a lot of that is just now that we have 8 people with experience of what we were trying to do, they can vouch for what we're doing with their brother veterans. They can help walk guys who would be brand new through what we're going to experience. We can improve a lot of things on the front end as far as getting prepared for the event. But the concept, I think, works. The interaction between the different service members really worked. The idea using volunteer cadre veterans who are successfully transitioned, helping their brothers who are brand new, that worked. Obviously, Wyoming in the backcountry is beautiful. So there's a lot of things that we did right. The cowboy action shooting was a hit for everybody. So we'll probably do that next year and ask the generous help of those cowboys, if not others. And I think in general, the venue, the ranch was beautiful. Now there are other ranches, and we don't necessarily have to go to the same place every year, but there's other options we could look at. But I think by and large, it went well. What will really be the proof in the pudding is the degree to which the guys who attended benefit this coming year. If real friendships form through this event, I think that's valid. That's going to be something that's we'll want to promote better next year. And then, the proof again in the pudding of the guys coming out, we're expecting these guys to be great leaders as in the civilian world, in the civilian space. We expect that they'll transition in a healthy fashion and they'll begin to make their mark on society. That's what we expect, because it's hard for me to describe without getting into personal details of the individuals who came. But when you look at their profile, and I've watched you enough to know that you pull a lot of punches. You don't blow your own trumpet about what you represent, what you've done in the past. I mean, you've touched on it a little bit, but all these guys are like you, veterans of war and combat. They're professionals. They're successful in their military careers. They've done a lot of incredible things in the past, and just the human quality is so just off the charts. You casually mentioned you speak 6 languages. I mean, that's like, oh yeah, doesn't everybody? But, the fact is most Americans don't speak more than one language. So we're dealing with incredible men here, and we have great aspirations for you guys going forward. And that's part of the whole idea doing this, is that we, the civilian world, need guys like you, and we need you guys to be successful. So we're going to do our best to help you, because we know that you'll do your best to help us.
Well, Joe, along those lines, just a little bit, I'll let the cat out of the bag, because I actually went by my state representative's office this morning, Dawn Kiefer, who was a guest on my program after I came back. By the way, Victor Davis Hanson that day, unbelievable. I really enjoyed the interview. And then I had Dawn Kiefer. She was also brilliant. But I went by her office this morning, asked for an endorsement, a letter of recommendation. The governor, I'm not a fan of the governor, but the governor of Pennsylvania, Tom Wolf, they've announced that there are 2 at-large positions they'd like to fill for the Pennsylvania State Military Veterans Service Commission. And so I'm contemplating putting my name in the ring to be a commissioner for the State Service Commission for Pennsylvania Veterans. So that's got to be turned in a couple weeks. So I'm going to consider putting that package together and maybe do something that kind of pays it back to the state and also help other veterans out. So that'd be pretty cool. So no one knows that, no one at all. That's the first time I've told anybody, just right now, literally. So just to give you an idea that that sort of thing does inspire people to do things that hopefully make a difference. And so I'm kind of I'm interested in that. We'll see if it happens, but just something I wanted to do. And Shack Dweller said he was once chased by a baboon after the milk he had in his hand. And he said,
it's terrifying.
He said he crapped himself because a baboon had big teeth. Okay, well, that's not Wyoming, but it is an interesting story, Shack Dweller. Thanks for sharing that.
I think if Wyoming, if the backcountry Wyoming had baboons, I think we would go armed heavily with more than bear spray.
Oh, they are nasty. They're a nasty creature, and they do have.
We probably would get permission to have automatic weapons if we had to worry about packs of baboons.
Automatic weapons. I'm liking the sound of that one. Yeah. Anyway. All right. Well, listen, folks, we're going to have Joe back on the program, and we're going to talk about Wyoming Catholic College specifically, about the curriculum, about the student body, what kind of school it is. It's not been around all that long. It's a recent creation. I think 2007 is when it first came in existence. First class around 2011, the first class graduated. But the program is growing. It's popular. It's doing well. And maybe if Joe would like to talk about, when we do that, we'll talk about his role as a fundraiser for the school, for scholarships and for helping the school out. Sure. So we'll do that. And then also, Joe and I like to talk politics. So we're going to talk politics before the election. We'll get Joe back on here. And so you'll see Joe Stong back on the channel. Joe, before we wrap up, we're going to close here. It's almost an hour and a half. You've been very generous with your time and also your flexibility because I had to reschedule because of my eye appointment. Is there anything you'd like to leave folks with? Anything at all? You want to talk about the school, faith, the trip, anything you'd like to, and then we're going to wrap up.
Well, I just want to shout out to our African viewers. We actually did accept 2 African candidates for to the college this past fall. Unfortunately, because of COVID and their visa situation, they weren't able to come. But that was a breakthrough for us to bring in another continent. So if you're interested, Wyoming Catholic College, we do accept foreign students. We have Canadians, we have Europeans, so it'd be great to bring in some other Africans if you can make the big jump. It is a school for pioneers. You have to be pretty good at a lot of different things to be a successful student at college. It's not just languages. I mean, you do learn to speak Latin. You have to be good at math. You have to be good at reading English. You'll be reading a lot. So there's also the ambitious 21-day trip that you have to do as a freshman. So you have to be in fairly good physical condition to be a member of the college. But that's something that you might want to consider. The other thing is that we don't receive federal funding. We don't take any state money. So we're entirely self-sufficient, self-funded. So hence my job raising money from generous people around the country, including in Canada, to help support us in what we do. The other thing is just for any veteran in your life, don't look at these guys as an object of pity. Look at these guys as brothers and sisters, people who are your peers and people who are going to be great companions in life's journey, because that's what they are. They're fantastic people. When you get to know them, you realize that they're just the sheer human capital that they represent. And that's something that, not putting them on a pedestal. They still have to make their own cases for things and not giving them too many freebies, but just consider that what they represent. I mean, that's that attitude of gratitude for their sacrifice, and then just their human quality. So that would be my other message, that what we've learned from this experience, and granted, this was special forces or longtime veterans. But I think in general, that's something that we should appreciate.
No, absolutely. And Joe, actually, I think I've neglected to send you my AAR, so I still owe you that if it's still time to get it in. But my apologies for that. I've been a little swamped. But excellent comments. Before we go, though, I just need to tell you that there's multiple comments coming in the chat right now saying, what a great guest. People really enjoyed it, found you very interesting, Joe. So that's awesome. Thank you, guys. I agree. It's a great guest. I'm glad I got Joe to come on the program. And before we leave, we should mention, since you mentioned Africa, Christianity is the quickest growing, fastest growing faith or religion in Africa. It's outpacing Islam in Africa, and Catholicism, especially in West Africa, not exclusively West Africa, but Catholicism is growing by leaps and bounds. I wouldn't be surprised if we see an African pope before too long down the road, maybe in our lifetimes. Yep. But anyway, so for people who don't know that, that's interesting. Now, one last thing, it's got to leave on an entertaining note here, Joe. But Tian says, he's telling Shack Dweller, every creature we have around here is extremely dangerous when cornered. I would have to say, Tian, I would tend to agree with you, with the exception of the famous social justice warrior. I don't think they're dangerous when they're cornered. I think they shrink like a wilting violet, and we go from there. But anyway, so all right.
Yeah.
Joe, thanks a lot for coming on, and thank you for
Yeah.
your contributions, and really thanks for putting a program together. It was an incredible experience, one I'll always remember, whether I go back or not. This will be something that stays with me forever. It was really special, and I made a lot of good friends out there and had a great experience, and it's all as a result of your inspiration and your desire to push forward for this, because I'm sure there were days when it's like, am I going to be able to pull this off? Can we get the support for this? Is it going to happen? But it did happen, and thanks to you and everybody who was involved at Wyoming Catholic College.
Well, thank you again, Chris. Really appreciate it. Look forward to talking to you again in the future.
All right. Well, we'll have Joe on before much too longer. I'm going to put you in the waiting room, Joe, and then I'm just going to close out the stream, okay? Thanks a lot, Joe.
Sure. All right.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's Joe. Let me fix the screen here. There we go. All participants should come up now. Come on. There we go. So that's Joe Stong from Wyoming Catholic College, a Michigander, originally from Michigan. And we'll forgive him for that. You know, it's funny because I actually grew up for part of my life in Ohio, and there's this big rivalry between Ohio and Michigan. It's funny because a lot of people go, oh, so you're you root for Ohio State when Ohio State and Michigan play in football. I'm like, nope. I root for the maize and blue. That's right. I root for Michigan because I don't care for that small farming and vo-tech school in Columbus, Ohio, because I went to a genuine institution of higher learning, the Ohio University in Athens, Ohio. That's right. The Harvard on the Hocking, ladies and gentlemen. So when it's Michigan and Ohio State, I root for Michigan. Just saying. Anyway, but Joe is a transplanted Wyoming resident now, and he absolutely loves the state, and I could see why. It's a brilliant place. I once tried to set my residency up there. I love Wyoming as well. Thanks so much to my guest, Joe Stong. Really appreciate it. We'll have Joe back on the program. Thank you, all of you, for your flexibility today, and I appreciate you, those who were able to show up in the stream after the confusion. And my apologies to those who have to watch this after the fact because YouTube didn't notify you of the stream. Several people sent me notes and saying, oh, you're streaming? I didn't get this stream notice. And so I suspect we'll have a lot more viewers after the fact, which tends to happen when YouTube doesn't inform people. But thank you all so much for this. Please tune in tomorrow when I have Eric Bello, the actor who's performed in Good Girls, MacGyver, The Walking Dead. You'll see him on here tomorrow. He's a professional photographer and a professional actor and quite a fascinating person as well. So we'll see him tomorrow, and that's Wednesday. Then on Thursday, I have Mimi Kalinda, who is a public relations specialist based in South Africa. We're going to talk about changing the narrative on Africa. Friday, by constant demand, Wyatt Dutoit will be on the channel, the former prisoner of war from Angola, from the South African Defense Force. We'll talk about his life, his career, and the Bush War in Southwest Africa / Namibia and Angola. Folks, thanks a lot for tuning in. This has been a Chris Wyatt production here on the Daba Africa channel, and we will see you guys tomorrow. God bless. Thank you so much for your patience and for your patronage of the channel. And I'm going to close out the video right here. Let's see if I can get this one right for a change, because I've gotten it wrong twice today. Anyway, where's it at? I got to find. Okay, so I'm going to take myself off the camera. It worked. Okay, let me take the Wyoming Catholic College off there, so that's not up there. And here comes the closing video. Thanks a lot, folks, and we'll catch you next time here on Daba Africa.